It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
There's a lot of little crazy things going on that I want to hit in this intro section. By the way, you're listening to the Phil Ferguson Show, and I am he, Phil Ferguson. First of all, recently I was watching CNBC, which I watch very little. And generally speaking, you should watch something between very little and none, just by the way. And they were talking about Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy who ran FTX that went from zero to hero, multi-billionaire in just a couple of years, and then right back to zero, if not worse, because he's going to jail for a very, very long time. And they were talking about how could this happen and how could people not see the con, the scam. Of course, he could be argued as independent of cryptocurrency, and then he was just scamming on top of cryptocurrency. I think it's inherent into the system, but that's me, right? And if you read some books on cryptocurrency, I think you could get to the same mindset as I have, or listen to my segments on it. But they had talked about, even just recently, a year or two ago, he was on CNBC talking about all of their great products. And there, you could see kind of this very brief moment of self-awareness that just for a moment, they're like, wow, how could no one see that this guy was running a scam? Oh, we used to have him on all the time talking about how great his stuff was. And there was this look on their collective faces, the 3 or 4 people that were at the desk, talking about today's news. And then someone threw in, let's talk about bonds and change the subject. But for that brief moment, they could feel the weight of history on them after they said, how could people not see this? Because they didn't see it. They didn't see it. They're just having on whoever's hot and whoever's trendy, whoever wants to come on their show because they've got airtime to fill. So when someone comes on there and says, these stocks are going to do great or these stocks are going to do bad, they just have them on without any regard to whether there's any credibility or basis or value to the viewer in what has been said. And that is why if you watch it for a little bit of news, don't watch too much, because everybody on there, I guess that's their job. Everyone who's visiting is there to sell something. And your job is to filter through that. And if you don't want to filter through that, if you don't want to try to figure out what's the best or what's not the best, that's one of the arguments for index funds. So that's a funny thing. Complete flip here, a bit of a positive thing. I was talking to one of my clients about Schwab and something that was goofy or didn't work out and was causing me a bit of pain. And he's like, is it okay that we all move to Schwab? Because I've only heard negative things from you, Phil. And I'm like, I'll have to correct that. So here's my little segment to correct that. So first of all, as humans, we tend towards, like the news, what bleeds, leads, something like that. Terrible things in the news make the news. The good things, the things that are running smoothly, don't make the news. They don't make good stories. It's just like when I talk about years and years ago, when I used to DJ weddings for more than 2 decades. Hundreds and hundreds of weddings I've DJ'd, and 96% of them went wonderfully, right? But what kind of a story is it? Yeah, everyone showed up on time, and I introduced everybody, and the bride and groom got along, and the food was pretty good, and they danced like crazy, and everyone drank in moderation, and everyone had a really good time, and then 50 people stayed behind to clean up. I even had a couple of people help me load my vehicle. Yeah, well, that's no story. The story is that one couple that had a fight in the middle of cutting the cake, where the groom smeared cake on the bride after they had agreed in advance not to. And in a moment of passion, she slapped his face so fucking hard that you could see her handprint for more than 30 minutes on his face. Now that's a story. But all the good things, there's no entertainment value. So I'm going to take a moment and provide you something with no real entertainment value. But here's the deal. Everything went from TD Ameritrade to Schwab virtually flawlessly, right? Where's the story in that? I'm fucking delighted that it did. It seems like now, after a good month or two of reflection, that it looks like virtually all, or maybe even all, connections for clients anyway, to go from TD Ameritrade and or now Schwab to their bank. It looks like all of those money transfers that were set up, they all worked. Every single one of them. For me, it was an exception because they didn't transfer over money movement instructions for companies. Okay, they should have told me in advance, but again, I'm not here to focus on that. I'm focusing on all the clients' money moved to the penny. Nothing disappeared. Matter of fact, one client had money show up. We fixed that. That was kind of a cute little thing that he was on that he shouldn't have been on. But the transfers worked. Schwab has a much better system for filling out accounts and doing some things online. They call it a digital workflow, where if you say, hey, Phil, I want to open up an IRA, you can start it, or I can start it, and I go online and I put in some information for you, and then I send it to you. And when I say send it to you, you've got to log on to your account at Schwab. You double check what I put in, make any corrections that are necessary, add anything else that's required by the form, and you put a digital signature, not even as difficult as DocuSign. It's just easy because you're already logged in and you're certified at Schwab as being that individual. And so opening accounts is easier. And once I know all the forms and the procedures, a lot of stuff will get easier. There are some things that cause those fun stories that are weird or stick out or take up my time or take up your time. But for the most part, it's going really well. Things on the whole are different. Some things are easier. Some things are a little harder. And there's a little bit of a learning curve between me and the people at Schwab. Some of them who I call and talk to are formerly from TD Ameritrade. So you get all kinds of things. But in general, it's been good. It's working pretty smooth. Everything is settling down. And it looks like going forward, by the way, last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, I got a roadmap, Schwab calls it, of all the things they're going to change with what I see and what you can see when you sign on to what they call Schwab Alliance. And there's some nice improvements. There's a field that I really would like to sort on that doesn't sort. They're going to change that. They've made a few tweaks to what I guess I would call the left sidebar that I see that makes it even more convenient and more useful for me. And they're making changes to things that you'll probably see as well. And they've got some of them planned yet in 23, more in Q1 of 24, and then stuff later in the year in 24. And they're actively working on improving these things where TD Ameritrade had basically stopped. And who can blame them? Once you're bought 3 or more years ago by Schwab, why would you spend a whole lot of money updating and changing your website? So Schwab's working on stuff. Probably at day one, the Schwab platform was a teeny bit behind where TD Ameritrade was, even with years of not updating stuff. But it's gotten better already, and you can see the difference. You can see changes that have happened. There's more planned, more coming. So that's kind of new. Total random subject change. Next thing, Department of Labor. I have talked about how I have chosen no longer to give advice in any way of what you as an individual should do within your 401k or other work-related accounts. They're called ERISA accounts. Those letters stand for some law written in the 70s, which I've forgotten again. But I also can't tell you that you should move it or shouldn't move it on a personal level. Now, on a general educational perspective, there's a lot of reasons to not leave your money in your 401k or 403b or similar type of account when you change jobs. And maybe I can redo that segment if people are interested. Just send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. But all of that being said, the Department of Labor is now working on pushing out a new definition for fiduciary. And this is a problem in the industry because the definition of fiduciary does change from time to time with new rules and regulations, and it might be different than what you think it literally means from a legal standpoint. Well, what the Department of Labor is probably going to do, I think this is kind of already cast. I don't know that it's been applied yet, but it probably will be. The Department of Labor's definition of what a fiduciary is will be different than what the SEC's definition of a fiduciary is. And this is one of those things that can drive people nuts. Why can't there just be one definition? I remember years ago when I was working with my brother who lived in Section 8 and had Social Security disability income and some other things, food stamps as an example. Every different program defined income in a different way. So the amount of income you made annually, monthly, weekly varied depending on which agency you were talking to, because some things counted as income, some things didn't. Not really the point here, a little sidebar there, but this is something that's going to make it a little more complicated for the investment world. And one of the things here is that, let's see here, I'm just going to read. This is from Financial Advisor IQ magazine. It's online. You can find it by searching Financial Advisor IQ. The title, Department of Labor's New Fiduciary Proposal Could Sweep Up Industry Salespeople. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let's see here. This is quoting, the proposal also deems an investment advisor a fiduciary if the provider makes investment recommendations to investors on a, quote, regular basis, unquote, still continuing with the article quote here, as part of their business and in instances in which the recommendation is based on a particular needs or individual circumstances of the retirement investor. So basically what you have is that pretty much everybody that helps you or puts on the airs, the appearances, or that you think is there to help you, which they may not be. Now going forward, once this rule is confirmed and implemented, will actually be a fiduciary. Let me give you a couple of examples that you may not be thinking of. You have a tax professional that helps you every year with your taxes. In one meeting, you sit down and you say, gosh, I have all this money and I don't want risk anymore and I'm getting close to retirement. What should I do? And the tax preparer says, hey, I happen to have an insurance license. I can put you in an annuity, a fixed annuity, maybe a variable annuity would already apply, but a fixed annuity, and that would help solve your problem. And you say, great, and they sell you the product. Now, they might get a juicy commission. Currently, I think, they're not a fiduciary. They're not necessarily acting in your best interest. They might be acting in their best interest, and there was not really anything to stop them. Another example is someone who is a broker-dealer, that as the broker, you can call them and say, hey, I want to buy X shares of this stock and no higher than this price, and they execute that, and they charge you a fee for being a broker. But they might also give advice. They might also act as the dealer. So the company that they work for is underwriting a new stock and they call you up and they say, you should buy this. They're telling you that because their boss is telling them that they have to move X number of shares of this new stock as their proportional allocation of everything that the company has to do. And so when they're calling you to tell you to buy that stock or quote unquote recommending that stock to you, they're doing it for their best interest, not yours. They might be the same, But going forward under this rule, it would have to be in your best interest. And you could argue that maybe that's a really good idea. But all of this applies only to Department of Labor ERISA accounts. It doesn't apply to your IRA or Roth IRA or your taxable account. So it also discusses in this article that there might be problems going forward if someone is managing your 401k, or you call up the company that manages your 401k and you ask for advice. If they recommend things like real estate, commodities, paintings, artwork, oil, annuities of all different types, they could be pretty clearly in violation of this new rule where they're not working in your best interest, not working as a fiduciary for you, but working to sell something that pays them a commission. Now, the funny thing, and I've talked about this on the show, only recently, only a few years ago, did the SEC open up and say, hey, you can now get these things in your work plans and in IRAs. Because in the past, you could not do a lot of that stuff. Some things you could do, but some things you couldn't do. And I thought that was good because it protected the investor. I'm assuming because of funding or influence from people in the industry, they got a hold of people and said, hey, wow, let's let us sell all this other crap in people's retirement accounts. Well, now the Department of Labor, it might be saying that in ERISA-related accounts, again, 401k, 403b, and another half dozen types of accounts, you can buy that stuff now. You can be sold that stuff now, but now that person has to act as a fiduciary. Oh, I got distracted. My previous example of a broker, if they come to you and say, hey, there's this new preferred stock that you should buy, they may not actually be able to do that going forward unless they can confirm that that's actually in your best interest, and it's probably not. So anyway, lots of fun stuff going on later in this show, not too much later now because this went way farther than I expected. Someone asked me, and I did a segment on, if you win the lottery, do you take the cash or do you take the annuity? And while I'm talking about words and definitions, annuity is one of those words that has multiple definitions across the investing spectrum. As an example, a 403b and a type of ERISA account that is often considered to be virtually like a 401k, but it's set up for people that work for the government, for hospitals, and certain other agencies, schools, universities. A lot of them have 403bs. That's actually often called a TSA or a tax sheltered annuity. And in that context, the word annuity means something different. When you leave a job and get a pension, they might say they're going to annuitize your pension and pay out a fixed amount every year. It is an annuity, but it's different than the tax-sheltered annuity. And then, of course, you can have an annuity that's sold to you by somebody getting a nice big commission. They all use the same word. They mean different things in different contexts, which drives me nuts, probably drives you nuts just as much. And then later on in the show, we have an interview with Joe Pittenger, and he is going to talk about his story, his adventure from being a member of the Salvation Army as a minister, and then switching to another organization or two, and then eventually taking his religion so seriously that he wanted to have more evidence, and he wanted to be able to argue with atheists. And you know where it goes. I mean, it's this show. You know what's going to happen. He ends up asking questions that cannot be answered and realizes the whole thing is a big stinking pile of steaming shit. And now, after he went to the Clergy Project, he is a member of the board and helps out with the Clergy Project. So anyone who is even tangentially related to some kind of church or ministry or mosque or temple or whatever it is you want to call it, if you're having questions, you want to listen to Joe. Now, Joe took the position, as does the Clergy Project, that they are not there to deconvert people. They are there to help people and have a conversation and help you work things. And you may stay in your job. You may stay with the clergy. You may stay in your church. That's cool. Just to be perfectly clear, he does not do that. I do. I want you to get the fuck out of your religion. It is a lie. It is a scam. It is a con. It is a mind fuck. There's no evidence to back any of them up. Just look at the others. 10,000 religions on the planet. You happen to have the one and only true one. Research other religions. Research your religions. Except for a fact that everyone that's promoting religion has some agenda, whether it's a money or a profit agenda, or it makes them more sheltered from being wrong if you join them on the side of the crazy. Religion is a net negative to the probability of survival for our species, and it needs to go away. Anywho, okay. Focus. We're going to take a quick break, something lighthearted, I hope, and we'll go in with other parts of the show.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. If you win the lottery, should you take all of the money at one time, or should you let the lottery annuitize it and pay you out over time? This is an email question I got from a person. We'll just do initials EA. They will know who they are. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And they were kind enough to provide me a link to the Mega Millions lottery. I think that's an ongoing thing. I don't do lotteries for the reasons that are pretty straightforward. It's a mathematical trick. You're better off just investing the money than playing the lottery. But let's say you played the lottery and you won. A couple of assumptions here. Your winning is $100 million. And of course, if it's only $1 million, you could just reduce all of this by 99%. But the question was, is it better to take cash or the annuity? So assuming you win $100 million, if they give you an annuity, according to the Mega Millions website, the first year's payment would be about $1.5 million. And each year that amount would go up about 5% so that you wouldn't be hurt by inflation. Well, now, to be honest, that sounds pretty sexy. So let's take a look at what could happen here. So if you get the $100 million and you take the annuity, $1.5 million. Next year, 5% bigger, 1.575, 1.63, 1.653 the following year. And in the 30th year, you're going to get over $6 million, almost $6.2 million. When you add all of that up over 30 years, that works out to about $100 million. So that's kind of cool. One thing that is often not mentioned, and I did not even do this in my analysis, but each year you're getting these payments, I'm assuming you're going to be taxed pretty generously. 35 to 45, maybe 50%, depending on where you live. So keep that in mind. That's an important thing to know. If instead you take the $100 million as a lump sum and you pay tax, and assuming the tax is $50 million, you only have $50 million to start with. Now, of course, we're assuming here that you're a rational, reasonable person who can control yourself and not go and spend the $50 million. Because quite honestly, if you can't fucking control it, take the annuity payments. It doesn't matter if it's more or less money. You will have 30 different opportunities to not fuck yourself. Whereas if you get this $50 million net and you blow it, it's gone, right? So, I mean, that might override any theoretical value you would get from investing the $50 million. But let's take a look. So in this scenario, you get $100 million, you win $100 million, but you only get net $50 million after taxes. And you take out $1.5 million. And for each one of these 30 following years, I'm going to take out exactly what I think the annuity would pay you to make it an equal comparison. So your 50 million decreases by 1.5 million to 48.5 million. And I'm going to start with assuming you make 5%. Now, the nice thing is that after everything's said and done at the end of the year, you end up with 50,900,000 if you make 5%. Of course, one of the problems with an assumption like this is, what if you have a year where you lose 20 or 30%? Well, one of the reasons to pick 5% is that right now, with short-term bonds, you can probably make 5%. Will you be able to do that over the next 30 years? I don't know. So you're going to have some of this money in stocks. If you had a 50-50 portfolio, theoretically, you might make 4% or more in the long run in bonds and 10%, give or take, in stock with an average of 7. So let's not do 7% yet. Let's try the conservative 5%. If you make 5%, what tends to happen is the amount that you're taking out is smaller than the growth of your portfolio, at least for a while. And it starts to flip around the year 20 or 21 into the time frame. And then the amount that you're taking out becomes bigger and bigger, and the growth is not keeping up. And so what ends up happening in this scenario, assuming a 5% return, is that at the end of year 30, you would have received the exact same money that you would have gotten from the annuity, and you still have $21.6 million left over. That's not bad at all. So to me, even at a very conservative 5% rate of return, you would at the end of the time have $20 million more, $22 million more than if you took the annuity. Now, here's an interesting thing to think about, though. Each year, the money that you're taking out, part of it will be dividends from the bonds and or stocks that you own. And that will be taxed on a very similar rate that you would have paid for the annuity payment. But in some years, or at least part of the money you're going to receive in many years, would be things that you sold that have had experienced capital appreciation. And of course, this would vary from year to year. You might have a year where the stock market is down and all you have is stock dividends and bond yields, and you sell a little bit bonds like we would in the Polaris plan in retirement. So in that case, you would probably be paying taxes similar to what you would with the annuity payment. It depends on a lot of things. Depends on the state that you're in. Some states might count the annuity as income, whereas the earnings from dividends on stocks and yields from bonds wouldn't count. So you might be able to dodge some state taxes. But if you have a year where the stock market is up, say like 2 or 3 years ago, it was up 20, 28% in 1 year, well, then you're selling, well, you still have the dividends and the yields that are created by the stocks and bonds, but the additional amount of money you will get from selling some appreciated stock investments. And you're not going to pay 15% long-term gains. You probably won't even pay 20%. You're probably going to pay 23.8% on the long-term gains. But 23.8% is going to probably be lower than the 28 to 45%, maybe even 50% that you would pay from the annuity. So you're better off. I am not taking that into account at all. I'm just mentioning that your taxes, if you invest the money, will likely be equal to or anywhere from 10 to 25% less per year than what you would get from the annuity. That's my understanding without researching the law. And of course, if you win $100 million, I'd be happy to help you. But you, of course, should hire a really good attorney and a really good tax professional to make sure all of that stuff is done correctly. Now I'm going to put in 7%. So every year, instead of making 5%, you make 7%, right? Seems pretty straightforward. And of course, I think making 7% in the long run is fairly doable, even with a portfolio that's half stock and half bonds. So half of your money makes 10% on average, and half of your money makes 4%. From the bonds on average, 10 plus 4 divided by 2, 7%. See what I'm saying here? And you get to pick and choose where you take the money out because you're going to have a broadly diversified portfolio because you're going to use a lot of index funds and do something like the Polaris plan. If you do that, what happens is you could take out the same amount of money that you would get from the annuity. But then at the end of 30 years, you would have 116.5 million dollars extra. So you could take out of that every year at the beginning of the year. I'm not even waiting to the end of the year. The beginning of the year, the same amount that you would have received from the annuity from the lottery company or the state, you could take out that same amount of money and end up with $116.5 million extra after 30 years. So to me, it looks like as long as you can make 5%, you're ahead. But if you can make 6 or 7 or more per year, you're going to be way ahead. So if it was me, knowing how to invest and where to invest and how to balance it and how to follow the plan, one could make in excess of an additional $100 million by just knowing what to do with the money. But like I said before, if for whatever reason you think you're going to go nuts, if you get handed $50 million net after half of taxes, because you won 100, but they hand you 50 million, if you can't control yourself, if you're just going to go out and the first 2 or 3 years spend $4 or $5 million per year, keep in mind, if you spend $5 million per year for the first 5 years, half of your money is gone. This will not work. You will end up running out of money. And what happens, I haven't researched the stat recently, but it's long-standing tradition that something like more than 80% of people that win $1 million or more from lotteries file bankruptcy within 5 years. The vast majority of them are in the first 2 years. And so when people win $10 million, more than half of them go broke within 2 years. It's a control thing. It's if you're always broke, if you're always going from Friday to Friday with your paychecks, that will not change with winning suddenly a large amount of money. You will rip through it. You will never believe that you would be able to do it, but people do. And they often buy wickedly expensive things. Like they go, hey, I have $50 million. I can afford a $2 million house. And of course, you can. And you go buy the $2 million house. And then you quickly find out that your property tax per year is $60,000. And your homeowner's insurance is another $50,000. And then there's repairs and upkeep, and you need a new roof, and it's not the normal house roof, which might be $10,000 to $15,000. You're out another $60,000. And so this stuff adds up. You buy expensive cars that depreciate very fast. You buy this house that has huge expenses to upkeep. And what happens is it's not so much that you buy things that you can't afford. You buy things that you can't afford to keep. And so that's where a lot of people end up going broke. And of course, that's on top of just handing out money or spending money unwisely. I mean, even reasonable investments sometimes can be more expensive, particularly a really large house is expensive to own and maintain. So the short of it, I guess, if you win $100 million, as soon as you get off the phone with me, if you think you can handle the money, tell them that you want all of the money up front. You take the tax hit in year one and you invest very carefully, very wisely in a very diversified portfolio where together we can control how much you take out and where you take it from year after year after year. And in the end, you will have $116 million more.
My father, the man responsible for my education, taught me that Islam, rightly understood, is a religion and philosophy of peace. In fact, he said that for any society to be peaceful and prosperous, it had to institute the rule of God, or Sharia. I came to disagree with my father. It was a gradual process that started when I entered and lived in societies such as the Netherlands and the United States that applied man-made constitutions and laws. Both countries are peaceful and prosperous. I now disagree even more with my father that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the amount of security that is deployed tonight here, the amount of security that is deployed for the Richmond Marathon. 6 months ago, the Boston Marathon was bombed by two brothers who invoked the founding documents and the founding father of Islam. I disagree with my father when I look at the wanton killing of the Westgate Mall in Nairobi by Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country, so it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's two most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. Welcome back, everybody. As promised, today I have Joe. And Joe, I didn't ask. Pittenger? I can't do that in Italian. That's definitely not an Italian name, is it?
I believe it's an English surname, and it means something like a quiet stream of water, nice field. So obviously, I'm a peaceful person, And,
yeah. And you are part of the Clergy Project, which we're definitely going to talk about. But before I do that, I want to talk, if you don't mind, a little bit about your religious background. What was your upbringing, and were you like a serious, real believer, or just like someone who pretended all your life?
Phil, I faked it for 16 years just so I could go to seminary and give lots of money to education and, I was definitely, I grew up pretty highly religious. I mentioned my surname being English, and my, I believe 5 times great-grandfather, came here from Europe in the 1850s, and he was actually on a ship named New Era, random detail, and it made it 5 miles off the coast of New Jersey where it sank. But fortunately, he was able to survive the shipwreck. Out of 422 people on board, only 163 made it. And I mention that because in his journal that I have, he writes about how he came here to the United States because he thought that he could live out his Christian faith in a stronger manner. And so the religious roots run very deep in my family.
Yeah.
And that went to, from him throughout the different generations. And so my grandfather, on the other side of my family, my grandfather on the other side, he was a minister. And then my father on the side of the family from which the person came from Europe, my father was a minister as well. And Phil, can you guess what I became?
Alkalite.
That's right. Yep. And yeah, so grew up very, very religious, and on to a certain sense, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The church provided a lot of community, a lot of family, and a little bit of my story is so my father, he was a minister, as I said, and even though it was an evangelical, somewhat fundamental, he had grown a little bit out of the fundamental type. I caught a lot of these messages of love and grace and helping one another, and my father, he put that on display. And don't get me wrong, I have my criticisms of religion, but I also look at how it helped my father. He actually, his father was very abusive, and in a way, the religion helped him, out of that, and helped him out of. He was the first person in his family to graduate from college, and it was a local church who really helped him a lot in some tough years of his life. And so I have some fond memories of growing up in it. I lived next door to the church, and so that meant it was a second home.
Right.
It also meant that I got to use the big screen, projector in the sanctuary and in the 90s when people didn't have like the big screen TVs like we do today. And I got to watch lots of movies on it and raid the church kitchen and a lot of wonderful things. My father, he passed away when I was 12.
I'm so sorry.
Make a long story shorter, I ended up living with a couple different families after that. And one of the threads throughout was the church. When I didn't always feel like I had my own family, the church was there. And it played a huge role in my life. When I was 18, as lots of young adults do, I went off to college. And I went to the school where that was part of the denomination, Nazarene, in which my father is a minister. And went to school there. I knew a lot of people through there, so provided kind of the network and community. And overall, I enjoyed my time there. While I was there, I began working with the Salvation Army and enjoyed that as well. I enjoyed the aspect of how they took seriously helping other people. They took the scriptures of, I was, hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. They took those scriptures pretty seriously, and I really enjoyed that. However, though, throughout this process, there's these underlying themes or these underlying messages that you would get that you need to be, a great disciple of Christ, and you need to know everything the Bible says and follow it to a T, because the Bible's perfect, of course. You know?
Yeah. And what denomination would you say you grew up as?
Nazarene.
Okay, Nazarene, and are they literal? Do they think they're literal Bible?
Yeah, so there's been a lot, as in a lot of denominations, there's been a lot of change.
Yeah.
To give a quick history of the Nazarene Church, it came out of two different branches of Christianity. One being the Methodists, and then the other being Pentecostalism.
Wow.
And they actually used to be called the Pentecostal Church of the Nazarene. But they thought the Pentecostals, they didn't fully understand the Bible, so they dropped that. My mother grew up Nazarene as well as my father. And at that time, my mom wasn't allowed, she could only wear skirts. So, no jeans or no pants, couldn't go to the movies, couldn't play cards because people might think that you're gambling. So very strict in that nature. And then as far as how they viewed Scripture, a very, as they would say, a high view of Scripture, which kind of meant a literal interpretation of Scripture, although I think there has been some change in recent years with that viewpoint within the denomination.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by literal interpretation because those two words don't go together. Literal interpretation, and anytime you read anything, anytime you read anything, unless it says 2 + 2 = 4, and even then, someone could be pedantic and interpret it a different way. We're humans, and the words represent ideas. The words are not the ideas; they are representations, and so it's very easy for someone to read a sentence, a paragraph, let alone a chapter or a 1,000-page book, and come up with different ideas. So, yeah, I always found that fascinating. Sorry, but so you went to seminary after high school? Is that how you ended up going? Is that your path?
So actually, I ended up doing my undergrad at a Nazarene school, and I worked 7-8 years for the Salvation Army. And as I was kind of saying, there's more of this push to really know everything, within the Bible and to follow it to a T. And ended up going to seminary, doing a Master of Theology, and enjoyed that process. I love the study of it. I took did like a private study where I did a world religions for a whole semester. However, it was taught in a very highly Christian point of view. But yeah, really enjoyed my time in seminary.
Now, did you say what church was that? Salvation Army? Is that a church? I asked knowingly.
Yeah. So what? Great question. So a lot of people they think of the Salvation Army as pretty much just thrift stores or doing donations at Christmas time. The bell ringing. But what a lot of people aren't aware of, and actually when I started working with them at the age of 19, I wasn't aware that they are actually a church denomination. They share some history with the Nazarene Church, and that the founder of the Salvation Army was a United, or not United Methodist, but just Methodist minister when they started, and they have somewhat of a cool story as well. In a way, they were founded the 1850s at a time in England where things were becoming industrialized and people were becoming marginalized and people were being left behind. A lot of poverty, a lot of issues, and they did a lot of good in addressing those issues. So the charity part of the church grew so much, that's what they became known as. And so I worked with them, and I enjoyed that part. But you know, Phil, I remember at times when I was working with them, and I would have to, I would preach and teach, and I remember at times, sharing the gospel, sharing how Jesus was God's son, and he died and rose again from the dead. And I still remember at times thinking, why is it that way?
Yeah.
That seems like an odd way to save the world.
It's dangerous to start thinking like that.
It's very dangerous. But that's all that I knew. I grew up in that, and I just thought, well, God loved the world so much, and that was his way of demonstrating his love. And so it didn't make sense to me, but I thought that's how God, that was his plan. And so really Christianity was that vehicle to help people at the time. But as I continued on in seminary and became an ordained minister, one of my favorite things to preach on was John 10:10. And if you know that scripture, it's, I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. And I really thought, it was such maybe a simplistic view, but a well-intended one, that God loved the world, and that through his son Jesus, he wanted everybody to have this incredible, amazing, fulfilling life. And so I was teaching that at different camps and conferences and at my local church, and really enjoyed that message. And so where I'm going with this is in 2016, I was invited to speak at a conference in the country of Denmark. And I thought about, what should I speak about? They asked me to speak 10 times throughout the week there, do a session every morning and a session every night. And I took this basic idea, the scripture of John 10:10, and wrote 10 messages around this scripture of how to live the most fulfilling life by living your life all out for Jesus Christ. And then my you asked about inerrancy of the word and literal interpretation, and that was part of it because that's what I believed at the time. However, when I went there, my undergrad was sociology, and I was aware of different statistics and studies about various countries and cultures of their levels of happiness and fulfillment. And I was aware that the Nordic countries, Denmark being one of them, had a very high level of happiness. And I also knew that they were a very secular culture. And it's one thing to see that on paper, but when you go and you taste it, you touch it, you talk to those people and you see that they're real and that they have a very different viewpoint than you. And so I'm there and I'm giving these messages at this conference, but I'm also thinking about the culture around me. And that little seed, which we can get into more, that little seed planted something that grew to really make a lot of change in my life.
Yeah. And of course, you're a minister now. You did some traveling. Did you have your own congregation? Were you like senior minister? I don't even know how that is named in that convention.
Yeah. So I had, as I mentioned, I'd worked close to 8 years with the Salvation Army. I had run a lot of different programs for them, worked for them at their divisional level. And then in 2013, I went to a Methodist church, actually, and I was their family minister. And so at this point, I was a family minister at a Methodist church.
Yeah. You still with me?
Yep, still there.
Okay. You're a minister at a Methodist church, and did something happen? Did you learn something new? Did you break? Did God piss you off?
A lot of people will say, they'll say, "Oh, are you upset at God? You had this stuff that happened when you're younger with your family and whatnot." And I would just say to the listeners, that is not the case. I'm not, someone who's just angry at God and shaking my fist kind of thing. What happened for me is, as I think, humans do, we want to live a very fulfilling life. And so when I was, I talked about Denmark and I started having this cognitive dissonance and just started thinking about, okay, I'm here preaching this message, about living the most fulfilling life that you can through being sold out to your religion. Yet I'm around all these people who don't live that way. And according to the statistics, they are more fulfilled.
Yeah, that's weird.
People and yeah. And now I can give excuses and, come up with different answers, but I started thinking, so what kind of further happened? I kind of put that in the back of my mind a little bit. And when I came back to the States, I wanted to take the 10 messages that I had delivered there in Denmark, and I wanted to put them in a book. And I thought, okay, I have 10 messages, 10 sermons. Each sermon will be a chapter of the book. And I thought, I already have the book written. I just need to take, the tapes from the video from the conference of me speaking and just, type it out.
Right.
And as I was typing, I kept on thinking about, who I would hope for my audience to be of writing this book. And the difference, why I bring that up, the difference is when I would preach or teach somewhere, I would think about the audience who would be there, but it was the people who kind of grew up in that. It was the people that I was familiar with. When I started to write this book, I had an intended audience that was different.
Right.
I'm not saying that anybody would have read this book. It might have just been my mother, but my intention was for, non-believers to read this book.
Yeah.
And with that shift in my mindset, I started thinking about non-believers. And then I had this crazy, silly thought, what if an atheist read this book? And then that led to the thought of, well, they're usually pretty decently well-reasoned people.
Right.
Would they read this book and say, hey, I disagree with the conclusion, but it's a well-built argument. You have some good premises in there. And if I was being honest with myself, which I was, and I told myself, you don't have a well-built argument. And at that time, I wasn't saying, Joe, your conclusion is wrong. But what I was saying is, I believe it was Aristotle or Socrates who said, know thyself.
Yeah.
And how can you be true to yourself if you don't know yourself? And it didn't sit well with me. I was, wanting to live a highly fulfilling life as we want to. And I was teaching and preaching and commanding others to do so in a very specific way. Yet I didn't know if I had good evidence for my reason for believing. And the scripture actually says it's been a while since I dabbled in the scripture, so I might mess up the scripture, but basically said always be prepared to give a defense for the faith that's within you.
And you felt like your arguments or your stories or your reasons weren't quite good enough to convince an atheist, so you decided to learn more, I'm guessing, and ended up with arguments that were better than what you were starting with?
Yeah, so I think that, I haven't done a poll or haven't looked up, statistics on this. I don't know if they're out there, but I would say the majority of Christians, if you ask them why they believe, I would, guess that the majority would say it's because of experience. And I'm not saying that we can't give any value to experience. However, that's not enough for me. As I mentioned, my undergrad was in sociology. I did a lot of sociology of religion work. Now through a very highly Christian lens. But I started to wonder, why is it that so many people in so many different cultures and different religions, they would say the same thing for their reason for believing as I would. And so that didn't sit well with me. And as we all know the saying, curiosity kills the cat.
Yeah.
I began to, I gave myself the ability, the allowance to not just seek answers from the apologetic resources of the that were Christian, but from different resources. And I started watching a lot of debates because I wanted to hear what both sides had to say. I wanted to give room for each voice. And I actually gave myself, basically an equation I gave myself, built an argument that from Scripture, in which I said, the first premise of it was, seek and ye shall find. That's, a promise of Jesus.
Yeah.
And then the second, teaching or premise of the argument that I said, put in there was Jesus made the claim that he was the way, the truth, keyword truth, and in the life.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, if I actively seek truth, if Jesus equals truth, if I actively seek truth, then what I should find is that it all points back to Jesus and the religion.
Yeah.
So if those, that's the argument that I built. And I think because of that, I gave myself allowance because I didn't go outside of those religious walls that I had constructed. I was still within the religion, but based on those teachings, I gave myself the ability to search. And so I thought in my search that it would just be kind of a couple-week process, that I would, watch some debates and read some books. And after a couple weeks, I'd say, Joe, you've been right all along.
Right.
And because I had such profound experiences as a Christian, and I could have never fathomed thinking any different way. And those couple of weeks, after about a month, after a couple of debates I listened to, I thought, uh-oh. And then, that turned into a month. And after, a month, it turned into 2 months and 3 months and 6 months and a year. And around that point, I started wondering, where is this going to go? I started having more and more doubts because I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't finding the answers that I was hoping for. I started realizing in the back of my mind, if this doesn't go as I hope it will, I could lose a lot. I got my living from being a minister. All of my relationships around me were based upon that, and it started to weigh on me. But that pursuit of truth, I wanted to live the best life that I could.
Yeah.
And I knew, if we went to write our own life, our own story, if we, author shares the same root as being authentic. And I had to say to myself, Joe, you have to take the pen here. You can't let your society and your community dictate what you think and believe. And so it was really a process of allowing myself to take the pen and start thinking about the type of literature that I thought was true and I wanted to write. So make a long story short with this, 3 years is what it took me. And I can look back and say, how did it take me so long?
Yeah.
But I had to unravel so many things. And because I knew that it would cost me so much, I wanted to make for sure. And it took me close to 3 years, and really about the 2.5 year point was when I said, I don't think that I can hold to this any longer. And I can go more into all of the different things that I studied and my viewpoints and all those things, if you like. But for now, I would just say 2.5 years is what it took me. And I was sitting in my driveway one day, and I had a friend who had come out to me as gay a couple years previously. And I'm not saying that it's the same thing, However, when you leave religion, it is somewhat of a coming out experience.
Yeah.
And I don't want to equate what he went through, because he grew up in a community where it was badly looked upon and was not accepted. And so I don't want to do that at all. But I think that I felt comfortable knowing that he knew somewhat. He had come out to something himself.
Right.
And I felt comfortable. And it was the first time in my life where I said out loud, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore.
Yeah.
And it was such a freeing moment, Phil.
It's
such a freeing moment.
You have so many of the common themes that I hear. One is exposure to different cultures. So you went somewhere else and you're like, holy shit, you can have a good life without this. And then you took your religion seriously, and not in a fanatical way, but, like you said, seeking out the truth, exposing yourself to different information. And then you get to a point where you can whisper it. You tell a friend where no one else can hear you. You're not in public, and it just sticks and it doesn't go away. And I know at some point, and I want to steer for a few minutes over to the other topic. At some point, you joined the Clergy Project. So give us a quick rundown of how that happened and what is the Clergy Project.
It's in one line, it's a wonderful organization.
Yeah.
More about it, though. So the Clergy Project is an organization that's founded by Dan Barker, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Linda Lascola. And it was founded about 11 years ago as Dan Barker, many years ago, he had left Christianity as well. And during, if you're familiar with Dan Barker, he does a lot of debates.
I know him well.
Co-president of, what's that?
I know him well, of course.
Yeah. I think I was just talking to him a couple weeks ago, and I think he told me that he has now done 140 debates. He's done a lot of great work in that space. And so when I was listening to different debates, I would listen to debates between, Christian versus atheist, Christian versus agnostic, Christian versus Jewish, all those different topics. And I noticed this person who was doing a lot of debates, Dan Barker. And in one of his debates, he opened up talking about how he was a minister and how he left his faith. And because of that, left being a minister. And it was probably the first person that I thought, that could be me. I could identify with someone. I could realize, he was just a person on a screen.
Yeah. But
I could relate to somebody. And then he mentioned this organization called the Clergy Project. And he went on to share, it's an organization that helps ministers who were in the boat that I was in. And to be very clear about it, they are not in the space of proselytizing. They're not trying to get people to deconstruct or deconvert. Basically what they do, people who have already deconverted, they say, okay, you've deconverted. How can we help you? And so we do three big things. Before I share what that is, I would just say, as I went through this time in my life, one of the big things I would communicate to listeners is the value of giving people the ability to be a free thinker, because I wasn't allowed to have that. I wasn't allowed to think outside of the box. During this time, I made a pastoral transition. I took a role as associate minister of a church and was looking at becoming the senior pastor when the senior pastor retired, as he was shortly. And there's a lot of pressure put on me by him and the eldership of the church. I couldn't have different viewpoints. You talked about inerrancy. I couldn't say, I felt if I said, I think there's a grammatical error in the text, I would have been fired.
Yeah.
And so to think like, I don't think any of this is true. I mean, that was, and so during that time, I felt so lonely during that 3 years. I couldn't really communicate to anybody about not even that I hadn't even left the religion, but I was even questioning it.
Yeah.
And so the ability to have that is huge. And so knowing in my mind that if I had to leave the faith as well as my career as a member of the clergy, it was nice knowing that there is an organization that would be there to help me. And so I didn't join the organization, until I had made that decision. I'm no longer a Christian. And so when I did, I ended up joining the Clergy Project. And real quick about them, the three major things that they do: they provide community. As I said, you feel very alone, and knowing that you are now connected to 1,200 plus. I think I just looked at the numbers the other day. We're actually getting closer to 1,300.
Right.
1,300 members, of which about, I believe, 27% are active, active and trying to leave the clergy. Knowing that you're not alone is huge.
Right.
And so we provide a very secure online community. We have a pretty rigorous process of vetting people because it needs to be someone who is in alignment with the organization. And so the second thing that they provide is counseling, and through a therapist who's registered with the Secular Therapy Project. And then the third thing is that they provide career transition assistance, which I'll get to, but I oversee that program actually now. And so that the organization, the Clergy Project, it really helped me know I'm not alone. And it gave me a key word I'll give here. It gave me courage. And courage comes from the Latin cor, and it means heart. And without courage, think of your heart. Without your heart, you die. It pumps the blood into the rest of your body. Without courage, you're not going to do much in life. And when I realized, so I mentioned in the driveway that day, I was with my friend and I told him, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore. And it was so freeing. But that moment only lasted maybe a minute, because in the next minute I thought, shit, now what do I do?
Yeah, yeah, because it's a very big problem for people in clergy. If you've been in that religion since you're a child and through high school and college or seminary, and you get jobs, and you're 25, 30, 35, everything everything you do is about that. It's not like changing a political party or changing which beer you like to drink. It's everything. So that can be a really big deal. So you're now helping others, right? I guess that's your role, is to be there for other people that are trying to work their way out or think through what they want to do.
Yeah. They helped me, leave the traditional religion that I was in, the fundamental religion that I was in, and helped me make that transition. And so about 6 months later, it was actually the beginning of 2020, or leading into 2020, right before the world changed.
Yeah.
Little did we know what was coming, but I was thinking about, what do I want for my life now? And especially, what do I want for my life, but what do I want in this next year of my life? And I thought, they've helped me so much, I would like to help them. And I'd become friends with someone who was on the board. And he said, I was talking to him about helping the organization. He said, Joe, I think you'd be great to serve on the board. And he nominated me for it, and I was voted in. And so now I help them with that. As I mentioned, I oversee the career transition department. And so basically, when I worked with the Salvation Army, I'd done a lot of career developmental work with individuals. Now, it's definitely a different demographic of people that I was working with. I did job training, worked with local career center, things of that nature. But when the board caught wind of some of these things, we weren't getting the results that we were hoping for. We were partnering with an organization outside of the Clergy Project to help our career transition department, and they wanted to bring it more in-house. They thought that having someone who has gone through that and understanding what it's like to go through it would be very essential. And then also my background working with the Salvation Army in that field would be beneficial as well.
Excellent.
And so basically what that department does is I meet with people who on Sunday or whatever day their holy day is, Saturday or Sunday usually, I meet with people who are teaching or being a spiritual leader at their congregation, but then on Monday they're saying I need to leave and they don't know how to, and so I help them make that transition. I go through just a lot of things about meaning and purpose, because a lot of them it's a serious loss. It's almost like a death.
Yeah.
That they're losing this, and help them rediscover purpose and vision in their life. And then from there, give them the skills necessary, resume building, cover letter writing, job interviewing skills, all those things. And one of the big things, and I would mention this to any listeners, is 60 to 70% of jobs, depending on different studies that you can look at, 60, 70% of jobs still come through a connection. And when people leave being a professional clergy, especially in more fundamental sects of the religion, they leave their community, they leave their network, and it's such a difficult thing. And so I mention this to listeners, if you have any opportunities, please get a hold of the Clergy Project. I can give my contact information later before I sign off here, but I've really recently, I've done that for a while, but recently I've really been trying to network on their behalf and build bridges and connections to help them.
So the thing I want people to know, anyone who's listening, because who knows who's listening, but if you're in the clergy or some related field and you're struggling or questioning, I'm not saying you have to leave, but if you want other people to talk to, the Clergy Project is the way to go. And you can meet those people, you can have community, you can get counseling with people that are professionals and trained to help you. And again, not necessarily deconvert you. That's not the goal. It's to make your life better. And maybe you decide your best option is to stay where you are. But if you decide to leave, there's people who've already blazed that trail that can help you out. There's people in the organization that can help you start to learn job skills and make those connections and find a job. And you have a lot of valuable skills. If you're in the clergy, you have training and the ability to work with people, talk to people, counsel people. Those are valuable skills. So don't think, oh my God, I'm never going to get another job. You are. It's going to be tough. I don't doubt that at all. But I think life is going to be better. And I'm about to run out of time myself, Joe, but tell people, how can they reach you and or the Clergy Project, and we'll wrap up.
Yes. So I am looking at my email for them just to make for sure that I get it correct.
Yeah.
My email is J, the letter J, and then my last name, Pittenger. That's Pittenger. So J Pittenger at clergyproject.org. So again, that's J Pittenger at clergyproject.org. If you are a member of the clergy, like Phil said, and you are looking at leaving due to changing belief, we would love to connect with you. Fantastic.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story so others can know it's going to be okay, and telling us about the Clergy Project. I greatly appreciate your time and your efforts to help other people out. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. If I could say one more thing.
Yeah.
Do we have time for me to say one more thing?
You do it.
Excellent. I would just say, if you've switched religion, or you haven't grown up religious, wherever you're at with that, I truly believe that our gospel is bigger. For lack of better terms, I say gospel.
Yeah.
Our good news, and it's much more inclusive. It's accepting. It's not about who's in and who's out and who's going to heaven and who's going to hell. And I just want to encourage you in that. And maybe if you're listening to this and you're wondering how you could find fulfillment without religion, that's what got me into this quote-unquote mess.
Right.
This mess of my life, which turned out to be the best, beautiful mess I've ever experienced. There is a much more fulfilling life. I'm not saying you can't have a fulfilling life in religion, but you can have, I think, even a greater fulfilling life outside of it. And I really want to encourage that. And one more thing is, I am in the process of writing a book. I would love it if Phil had me back on when I get that done.
Absolutely.
As I go more in depth of these things. Well, Phil, thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
And what's meant to happen when you die and go to heaven? You see a big bright light. You walk towards the light. What's at the end of the light? All your dead relatives. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. You ever spent a weekend at your grandparents' house? It's fucking shit. You'd be out there for an hour going, wish all me friends would die. Be out there meeting everyone. Hello, Nana. Hello, Granddad. Hello, Uncle who used to touch me. How did you get up here? Oh, that's right, you used to work for the church. You hear that little groan when I said that? When I said you have to work for the church? It's because religious people are in the crowd and they don't like hearing facts. That's a fact. There's been pedophiles in the Catholic Church. It's been on 60 Minutes. Fucking fact. But I say, and it's like, oh, no. Because religious people will forgive God for fucking anything. If in their mind, he does good things. Rainbows, children's laughter, shit like that, right? But when he does bad things like hurricanes, AIDS, cancer, child molestation, then we just go, oh, well, God works in mysterious ways. What type of an excuse is that? What is mysterious about acting like a fucking asshole? That is like the least mysterious activity since the dawn of time. If I ever date a religious girl, she's going to come home and I'm going to be raping her mum, right? And she's going to look at me and go, what are you doing? And I'm going to go, I'm mysterious. I've always been mysterious.
It's time to wrap up the show. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Again, this is the Phil Ferguson Show. I am delighted you are here. 2 things you can do for me. Go leave a 5-star review somewhere or share the show with a friend. I would greatly appreciate that. The more people we can help out with money, with investments, learning how to do them and what to avoid and how the game is played, how you can and probably are or will be manipulated by someone trying to sell you something. And that goes from annuities to solar panels, to car purchases, to home buying, all kinds of crazy investments like buying art. By the way, don't. Private placement REITs, big ripoff. Master limited partnerships. There's just an endless supply of this stuff. This is show, what was it, 474? I thought maybe after a year or two, I would run out of things to cover. There's always new stuff. There's always things to go back to because I have new listeners. So whatever you want to hear about, there's a topic I haven't covered lately, or you don't think I've covered it ever, which is definitely possible, despite, 10, 13 years of doing the show. I'll have to look. I think it was 2010 for this show, and I was on I had a show before that, and I was on somebody else's show before that. So, god damn, it's been a while. But if there's something you haven't heard about, or you want me to expand on the thought, let me know. I don't think I had it at the beginning. Just a brief thought on volatility. I recently had someone remark to me that their portfolio is worth $1 million, and then they lost $100,000 in the stock market in a couple of months, which in calendar year 2023 is true. They did. The funny thing is they didn't mention or didn't notice that from January 1st to July, they made almost 100,000. So they made 100,000 or more and then lost 100,000. And then just a week or so ago, the stock market went up 5% in 1 day, in 1 week, not 1 day, in 1 week. And so if you have $1 million, roughly, give or take 900,000 in this case, maybe for them, they made 40, 45,000, 50,000 in a week. That is volatility. Market goes up, market goes down. Stock market is a long-term thing. If you are looking at your holdings every day, I beg you, stop doing it. Once a year should do it. If you want to look once a quarter, that's fine. The other thing I recommend for a little bit of a sanity check and what this person was doing by looking at the returns from July until a certain date in November is that you're cherry picking. You picked an arbitrarily high date and an arbitrarily low date, and it looked bad. And it did. It looked terrible. But you can game the system, and you could have picked the ending date as the date in July and the beginning date as January, and you made 15%. One of the reasons I try to only give annual numbers for the history when I talk about the S&P 500, which you can go double check yourself at Wikipedia, S&P 500, I give the annual numbers so that there is a framework that I'm following of this year, this year, this year, this year. So whenever we talk about those, they don't change. They're done. The only time that it gets a little goofy is if I mention something year to date, or if I mention something has happened in the last 6 months or 9 months. Those are more, you should be more cautious when hearing anyone, including me, talk about that, because I could be intentionally picking dates that promote the story I want to tell, even if I don't mean to. Again, human, right? We do things like this all the time. So just keep that in mind. Be skeptical. Skeptical investing, investing skeptically, whatever I want to call it. But anyway, it's a long show. Thank you for being here. I do hope to see you out there on the road sometime soon. Until then, ciao.
Well, I was born too late to play in the Rolling Stones. I don't know Jimmy Page, I never met Yoko Ono. Standing with a strap, I'm rock and roll's bastard son. Go out, get drunk, get laid, have fun. Don't got $1 million, don't drive a Cadillac. Give me half a chance, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. I've been machine gun, handgun, high There's a girl at the bar wants to get me back.